Are phones too big today? That's the question I want to explore, because Apple's current lineup starts at 6.1 inches with the iPhone 17e and goes all the way up to 6.9 with the iPhone 17 Pro Max. That's basically a bezel reduction away from 7 inches in your pocket. And when you remember that the original iPhone was launched with a 3.5 inch display, it really does stop and make you think, are phones too big today? Now, I don't actually think that there is one perfect iPhone size for all time, but I do think today phones in general are too big. Now, there was a time when 3.5 inches felt perfect, and that wasn't because small was inherently better. It was because we were using phones differently back in 2007. Back then, phones were mostly still for calls, text, email, and light web browsing. Today, they are media machines. They are how we watch and scroll and navigate, work, and generally waste time. So I understand why screens got bigger, but I also think something important got left behind. Because Apple didn't just follow changing habits. It helped create a new normal where the compact phone started to look like a compromise. And that's why I want to explore how we went from 3.5 inches feeling perfect to a world where 6.1 inches is considered the minimum. And by the way, the normal 17 series is 6.3. And again, it's a bezel reduction away from 6.5 inches. When the iPhone debuted in January 2007, Apple marketed that tiny 3.5 inch display as a video screen you could actually use. They explicitly called it the ultimate way to watch TV shows and movies on a pocketable device. So even at the beginning, the idea of the phone as a media device wasn't some future concept or something that evolved after the first iPhone. It was part of the pitch. The big difference was priority. Back then, the phone still revolved around calls and texts. Then fast forward to, say, September 2005, Apple introduced the iPhone 5 with a 4-inch display. And the messaging was telling. The screen grew taller, not wider. So it stayed usable with one hand, while showing more content, including widescreen video. So early in the iPhone history, phones were always pocketable and ergonomic, but they weren't designed in such a way that it didn't take into consideration the use of media. But when I look at my chart over here, I see experimentation. And this is where I can tell you, I think I can point to when the 6.1 inch screen size was decided. And by the time they introduced the iPhone mini, it was too late, it was destined to fail. So let's talk about the lineup of experiments.
Okay, I think the only way to show you all of the screen sizes is to show you the research that I've done. Now, I wish that I had every single iPhone and make a fancy video. And I even thought about printing off every iPhone, the actual size, and just making a cardboard mock-up. But I don't have the time. So you're getting a spreadsheet today. So obviously we all know that the original iPhone was introduced in 2007 with a 3.5 inch display. And as I've already explained, that was perfect for the time. It's about the same size as a credit card. So interestingly, we had the same iPhone from 2017 all the way to 2011, essentially. And so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. It was an ergonomic phone that could fit in one hand. Now, Steve Jobs died. We lost him in 2011. And that's when they introduced the iPhone 5. A beautiful phone. And seeing this in person was what gave me the inspiration to buy the Mini. It had a 4-inch display, but it was still usable with one hand. But we still had one phone. You could only buy an iPhone. If you wanted a new phone, it was an iPhone 5. Then, in 2013, they introduced 2 tiers of an iPhone. The iPhone 5S and the iPhone 5C with a polycarbonate colourful case. Plastic, in other words. It was a flagship phone, but it felt cheap. Now, it had the same screen size, but it flopped. People gravitated towards the more premium 5S. And so we only had a couple of years of the 5. The iPhone 6 was launched in 2014. And its screen size was 4.7, as you can see here.
And yes, they're bigger. They're a lot bigger. Here on the left is an iPhone 5S. In the center, iPhone 6. And on the right, the iPhone 6 Plus. I think you can see the difference.
And we maintained that screen size. You could buy a new, and the SE2 all the way to 2022. Sorry, it's missing here. We could actually buy the iPhone SE3 up until last year. So I could probably buy an SE3 and replace my Mini, right? No. So this is the same year that the iPhone 6 Plus came out with an enormous 5.5-inch screen. And actually, at the time, it was very controversial because we had Bendgate and it was quite a large phone, etc. So here you can see it's sort of the Mini, which was released later, is in between those two phones. So now I think the two new phones available in 2014 were differentiated by size. The most expensive iPhone 6, the most expensive iPhone in 2014 was the 6 Plus. And that's important to remember. I think it kind of positions the larger phone as a more premium device in a way. And it wasn't until later in 2016 that we seen the first SE phone introduced. Now this is the first time that an actual budget phone was introduced. So the SE series was essentially a way for Apple to use the parts bin and sell a cheaper phone, while not being so cheap in a way. And things didn't change for a long time. We had 4 years of the iPhone 6 series that evolved into the iPhone 8, which had a glass back. The Plus came out, had dual cameras from the 7 onwards. And I think we had wireless charging introduced with the 8. Now, interestingly here, in 2017, the X was introduced. So this is the new super cycle. It was the first time we had a screen-to-screen phone with iPhone, and it was 5.8 inches. The biggest iPhone to date. It's still kind of small by today's standards. But where I think we re-solidified the 6 plus inch phone as the premium or as the standard size for an iPhone was the introduction of the XR in 2018. So in 2018, we had the XR series and the X series, the XS series. So you had the XS, which was the 5.8 inch screen. I'll show you here. We had the XR, which was the 6 inch screen, 6.1, and the XX Max, which was the biggest iPhone ever at 6.5 and the most expensive phone you could buy. So what's interesting here is that the XR was sort of in between the iPhone XS and the iPhone XS Max. So now we've gone back to differentiating the phone lineup again. So now you have a sort of a flagship entry level, the XR, and then the X series, which would become the Pro series. Now, there was a lot of controversy with the XR at the time because it had a compromised screen. I think it was only 720p and all that kind of thing. However, it sold really, really well. And of course, the following year, the XR became the 11 series, which is now the standard series of phones. So we have the 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So looking at this lineup here, in 2019 was the first time we had the iPhone series of phones sort of evolved into what we recognize today of the standard phone and the Pro phones. And then, of course, I think the SE was cancelled, but will be later introduced in 2020. So 2019, we had a very simple lineup. We just had the standard 11, the 11 Pro, and the 11 Pro Max. So now in 2019, we had the 11 series, the 11 Pro, the 11, and the 11 Pro Max, still at 6.5 inches. Interestingly, the 11 Pro was 5.8 inches. It stuck with the 5.8 inches. But of course, then in 2020, we got the 12, which was introduced with a 6.1 inch. And then Apple decided to introduce the 12 mini. And it makes me think, what if they just introduced the XR even as a 5.8 inch screen? Even as a 5.5, the same size as the Plus. Would it have sold as well? I don't know. But the 12 and the 13 mini were introduced as a series. And I feel like it was just didn't make sense. And they didn't like the name. They call it the mini and it didn't sell. Later they introduced the 14 Plus and the 15 Plus and the 16 Plus, and they cancelled that after 3 years because people didn't want a big phone. So that's an indication that an entry-level phone, 6.3, 6.1, 6.3, it seems to be the sweet spot. But no one wants a bigger phone unless they want the Pro Max. And a lot of people ordered the Pro Max, like I did, because you want a better battery. So that's what I think happened here. There was a bit of a schism with the iPhone series of phones, and they introduced the mini when it should have never left in the first place. It should have never been called a mini, and we should have always had an option. They just disappeared the option by introducing the XR as a 6.1. Maybe they could have introduced an XR and an XR Max or an XR Plus. And maybe we could have retained a smaller compact phone. It would have just fit there. But here's a little graph that I put together of screen sizes. So here you can see we had small phones introduced. The screen size went from 3.5 to 4 to 4.7 and 5.5. And then in 2020, you had a dip with the mini, which was funny. And the latest phone is almost 7 inches.
A big part of this story isn't just the screen size. It's how Apple tried and retired to build a good, better, best iPhone lineup without destroying its premium identity. The iPhone 5C was colourful but not truly cheap, and it was introduced in 2013 as a second phone for the first time alongside the 5S. It had a 4-inch Retina display with a polycarbonate shell, plastic basically. The market appreciated it as a cheap iPhone and quickly discovered it wasn't cheap enough to create a whole new demand wave. And reportedly, Apple cut 5C orders as consumers leaned towards the higher end 5S. So this feels like Apple learned a lesson. If you create a new tier, people are going to judge it mainly by price expectations. And if you miss that expectation, the product gets stuck in kind of a limbo. In September 2018, Apple introduced the iPhone XR with a 6.1 inch display. And this, I think, was the pivot that introduced the 6 plus inch screen as the kind of default size. So Apple made a more affordable phone, and they made it big. That same year, Apple pushed the top ends to be bigger too. We had the iPhone X and the iPhone X Max, which hit 6.5 inches. So now the message is obvious. Bigger is better. Perception is everything, isn't it? Mini versus the SE. This perception doomed the flagship. And this part annoys me as a Mini fan. People kept calling the Mini a budget iPhone when it was actually a flagship phone, just smaller. The iPhone 12 mini really was a flagship. In 2020, Apple announced the iPhone 12 and the iPhone mini. The mini was a 5.4-inch 5G iPhone. And reviewers are very clear about what that meant. Same processor, same cameras, basically the same core experience, but smaller. The major trade-offs are, of course, were battery life. Screen size was not a trade-off, but I think the perception out there was it was, but it was a feature in itself. And yet people kept comparing it to the SE, I believe, as if they were in the same category. And that's where the pricing controversy comes from. The SE is a value phone by design, using binned parts essentially. The Mini was a size first flagship. That's not the same thing. And some comparisons at the time captured how awkward this was. It landed the Mini in a kind of a strange place where one was clearly a better experience, the Mini, but also meaningfully more expensive. So today, Apple is no longer optimizing the iPhone lineup for ergonomics. And the 17 Air is thin but quite large and still compromised in the battery department. But trust me, nowhere near as compromised as my iPhone 13 mini. So when I look at the lineup today, which is quite complex, we have the 17E, we have the 17 series, we have the Pro Max, and the 17 Air. So in basics, we have the E series, the normal 16 series, the Pro series, the A series. I don't see room for them introducing a compact phone just for it to fail again. However, do we need to give up all hope? Could the rumored iPhone Fold become the new compact flagship? What if the new compact iPhone is the Fold? What the current rumors suggest point to a kind of a book style foldable iPhone, compact phone that opens into a small tablet. The current rumors suggest that the cover display is around 5.5 inches, just 0.1 inches bigger than the iPhone mini. And ironically, the identical size as the 6 Plus, which was introduced as the Phablet iPhone back in the day, with the inner display at around 7.8 inches. So a good bit bigger than the Max. There are repeated suggestions of a 2026 launch window. We'll see. And reporting has also pointed to software changes that would support more iPad-like layouts and side-by-side app behavior. That would be for the unfolded version. Now, it's not going to be a cheap phone. It's going to be $2,000 or more. And perhaps we'll get a battery capacity that's bigger than the Air and good enough for all day. But it looks like we're going to have compromises in the camera system and perhaps still have compromises in the battery. Will people say, if you want a large screen, just buy the 17 Pro Max? It's too compromised? Or will people just go, it's the latest hot device, a status symbol, and I want it? I don't know. It will probably outsell the Mini. It is probably the closest we're going to get to a Mini. I just don't know, but I'm super excited to see what Apple actually do. Thank you for following me on this journey of iPhone screen sizes.